I'm Farah Morali. Tonight, a suspected electrical fire in Toronto's Bloor West neighborhood forces dozens from their homes.
It kind of shook the building a little bit.
Fire crews continue to investigate exactly what caused the blaze in the 16-story building. Plus,
we're now 4 days in. It feels like months.
In BC, after days of destructive wildfires, crews say they've turned a corner. But thousands of residents are still waiting to go home, anxiously waiting to learn the full extent of the damage. And
everyone's very excited for the horse to win.
We take you to Canada's oldest thoroughbred horse race, the King's Plate in Toronto.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Many residents of a West End building are still waiting to return to their homes tonight after a major fire this afternoon. Power was knocked out in the apartment and isn't expected to be restored now until tomorrow at the earliest. Just what sparked the blaze is still unclear. Tyler Cheese was on scene and has more.
I was just sitting on the couch hanging out, and there was like a big kind of boom sound.
That's what Connor Beck heard inside the building where he lives just after 2 p.m.
And it kind of shook the building a little bit, and then the lights kind of started flickering on and off, and then the fire alarm started sounding.
Flames broke out at 357 Rusholme Road, a 16-story high-rise just south of Bloor Street West. When crews arrived, the fire was categorized as 2-alarm, but was quickly upgraded to 5-alarm.
Toronto Fire Service was met with a serious electrical fire throughout the building that was generating and producing a large volume and quantity of smoke.
Though the blaze was contained quickly, the entire building was left without power as a result. Toronto Fire says 267 units were impacted. As crews investigated the building's electrical system, many residents were left wondering when they would be able to get back into their homes.
We don't really know what's happened, if we can go back in or whatever, but like we need to plan, call family, getting work, what are we going to do tomorrow, are we going to get our stuff.
Many were able to evacuate before emergency crews arrived, but some were asked to shelter in place. No one was injured.
And we continue to do door-to-door welfare checks on all of those individuals in the building because the incident commander made the correct decision, given the volume of smoke throughout the building and in the stairwells and hallways, to shelter the residents in place. So we continue to do welfare checks on each unit.
A TTC bus was brought in to shelter the residents that evacuated. Toronto Fire says its investigation is ongoing and the Office of the Fire Marshal has been notified. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
It has been more than a week since a fire tore through an Etobicoke industrial building, but cleanup efforts are still ongoing from chemicals that spilled into nearby waterways. The Toronto Wildlife Centre says more than 100 animals had to be treated due to the oil spill, including a blue heron and 2 ring-billed gulls. The province's Environment Ministry says runoff has worked its way into the Humber Creek and further down to Mimico Creek after rainfall on Thursday night. The Wildlife Centre is urging anyone who sees an animal in the area covered in residue to call their hotline. It has been a deadly 24 hours on GTA roads. In Mississauga, one person died after a multi-vehicle crash on the QEW. Ontario Provincial Police say it happened around 1 last night on the highway near Hurontario Street and Mississauga Road. A man in his 30s was pronounced dead on scene and 5 others were sent to hospital with minor injuries. Meanwhile, in Brampton, a driver died after crashing into a pole. Police say it happened near Steeles and Finch Avenue West just after 1:30 this morning. A woman in her late 20s was pronounced dead at the scene. And back in Toronto, a pedestrian is in life-threatening condition after an overnight collision in Yorkville. Police say a man in his 50s was struck by a vehicle around 3 this morning near Bloor and Bay. The driver stayed on scene and is cooperating with police. The victim is still in hospital with critical injuries. And a 19-year-old has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with a fatal hit-and-run last week. It happened on Tuesday near Sherbourne Street, north of Queen Street East. 54-year-old Douglas James McDonald was found in the middle of the road and pronounced dead. Toronto police say McDonald was physically attacked before he fell to the ground and was struck by a passing vehicle. Initially, police said he was considered to be the victim of a hit and run, but his death was later ruled a homicide. To the wildfire situation in British Columbia now, as evacuees make their way out of danger. Stories of terror and devastation are coming with them. Yvette Bren looks at the picture emerging from the Bush Creek fire in the province's Shuswap region.
The firestorm hit the Shuswap region northeast of Kamloops with no warning.
Everybody were out there and we were all trying to get sprinklers going, and all of a sudden that just blew over the river and
just in seconds. Amazing.
Oh, terrible.
People fought flames to the last minute.
The gas station blew up. Our trailer park burnt down, so we were right there. We were trying to fight the fire ourselves because we had no help, so we had like 3 pumps set up.
He says one man almost didn't escape.
I looked, it was all red. You know, it was all red. I thought, is that fire or is that smoke? Smoke doesn't go red like that. It was a fire, eh? The red flames were showing about 2 blocks over top of the mountain, eh?
A steady stream of evacuees headed here to Kamloops Reception Centre.
I think we lost everything. My chickens, my cat, all the trailers, everything. I wanted to go back, but we couldn't.
The concern is about the number of properties that may have burnt down.
There has been very widespread impact in some of these communities. Probably some of the most extreme fire behavior BC might have ever seen.
Fires and roadblocks are driving frustration. In the town of Chase, a driver ignored a roadblock and headed toward the fire.
Until I went over the bridge, all the sprinklers are going and the fire is right there. And I'm thinking, oh my God, hurry up traffic, get off the bridge.
She did get out.
I mean, so many people have worked so hard to get where they are, you know, have kids, go to school and all that kind of stuff. And then this happens. And you think of Kelowna, where they're worse off than we are.
Her house stands, but many are gone. Yvette Bren, CBC News, Kamloops.
After a cool, damp Saturday in Yellowknife, officials say the fire is not expected to reach the city either today or tomorrow. But with little more rain in the forecast, authorities in the Northwest Territories stress the danger hasn't passed. Tens of thousands of Yellowknife evacuees are seeking shelter across much of Western Canada at campgrounds, hotels, and evacuation centers. Only about 2,000 of Yellowknife's 20,000 residents remain in the city. The fire is expected to start moving closer to the outskirts in the coming days, with drier conditions ahead. Sophia Kambalia joins us now with a look at the forecast. Sophia, how are things looking in the forecast for areas where we're seeing all these wildfires?
Farah, thanks for that. Unfortunately, in the coming days, not much more than just a passing shower in the Northwest Territories. Meanwhile, though, in parts of central and southeastern BC, we're actually looking at the potential of some soaking showers coming in midweek. Not for anybody, though, watching those fires in the coastal mountain ranges. Winds will be light in the coming days, but the long range sees another ridge of heat and high pressure build in that will exacerbate a firefight that will be here for weeks. We will see the smoke in the form of hazy skies in the next couple days from all of the fires that we've talked about so far in the show. But besides a light northwest flow for us here in the Great Lakes Basin, high pressure will be our story, and we have a calm, stable, and fairly sunny few days ahead. But watch the temperatures. Monday, seasonal, maybe a bit below if you're anywhere sort of north of the 401 and into cottage country, and similar story for Tuesday. But I beg the question, today we hit 29, and I'll tell you about how in the long range it could be maybe our last shot at 30 degrees for really the remainder of this season. Yeah, the cool fall-like temperatures are on the horizon. Farah?
All right, thanks so much, Sophia. Canada's oldest thoroughbred horse race kicked off in Toronto today with a name that hasn't been used in more than 70 years. Now dubbed the King's Plate, the prestigious race brought all the pageantry, high fashion, and excitement that the Queen's Plate did before. Our Clara Pasica was there for all the action.
Thousands of people were off to the races in Toronto this afternoon for an event that's been known for decades as the Queen's Plate. Now dubbed the King's Plate for the change in monarch, it's back for the 164th time. While some of today's attendees are horse experts, most seem to be here for a good time with friends and family, and maybe try their hand on a lucky bet.
It's fine. You just got to take a look at them.
And the name.
The name's a good indicator. Is it fun?
They all look pretty strong, pretty fast, pretty quick, so it's going to be a good race.
I think we'd be lying if we said that we knew anything about horse racing.
The energy here is always buzzing, and everyone's very excited for their horse to win. So, you're screaming, you're up on your feet, you're like, yeah, cheering. Usually I'm just cheering along, and people are just happy for you too, and it's a good vibe.
But not everyone's here just for the horse racing. Some are here for the hats.
I love the hats. Getting dressed up, being able to put on a fancy dress and hat, and just the atmosphere of it. It's just so exciting.
David Dunkley is a man who really knows his hats, training under the milliner who made hats for the Queen.
It's all about fit and comfort. If you are comfortable in your hat or fascinator, then you will enjoy what you are wearing. So the job of a milliner is to ensure that everything about that is right for you. And then from there, just have fun.
Like every year, many take the opportunity to get really dressed up.
My attire I created during the pandemic. I'm a big supporter of the arts, and I wanted to have a costume that I could wear out to events like this and just mingle with people, and the plan worked. A lot of people took photos with me, and that's what I was aiming for.
This is a great celebration of being Canadian, being in a parliamentary democracy, and sports of kings.
Paramount Prince wins the 164th Kings Plate.
Those who bet on Paramount Prince today went home with their pockets full. The horse dominating most of the big race, proving impossible to catch. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Toronto.
We are nearing the end of August, which means it's almost time for back to school. But early signs point to Canada entering a fall COVID wave, with updated boosters still weeks away. Dr. Isaac Bogosh is an infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network. He joins me now to talk about what kind of protection we have going into the fall. Good to have you on the program tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
So the new data that's out seems to show that positive COVID tests and hospitalizations have jumped in the last couple of weeks. Are these trends something that we need to be concerned about at this point?
I think it's something we just need to follow. And still, if we take a snapshot of where we're at right this second in Toronto and Ontario and elsewhere in Canada, there actually are pretty low levels of community COVID right now. It's still here. We've got to acknowledge that it's still here. But of course, it's a little bit higher than the weeks before, and it's expected to rise as we move through the summer and into the fall. We've seen this year after year after year now that we are going to see a rise in cases predictably as we move from the summer into the fall.
I wanted to ask you about protection. We know that some of the data shows from the government that about 85% of Canadians haven't had a vaccine in the last 6 months. What kind of protection do they have from the virus at this point?
I think it's important to remember that most Canadians have been vaccinated with 2, and many have had 3 or even more vaccines. Again, we don't want anyone to get the infection, but we know that the vast majority of Canadians have had a COVID infection and have recovered from that infection. And that combination of vaccination plus recovery from infection leads to what's called hybrid immunity. You can still get COVID, it just, on average, the likelihood of having severe illness is reduced. So, of course, we are going to see a rise in COVID cases. Sadly, we're going to see a rise in hospitalizations, and sadly, some people are going to succumb to this illness. We know that the most at-risk people are on the older end of the spectrum, people with underlying medical conditions that put them at greater risk of severe illness. So those are the big risk factors for more severe illness. So it's especially important for those individuals to really keep up to date with their vaccines. And there will be a fall booster vaccine campaign. And again, the National Council of Immunizations in Canada has strongly recommended that those groups get the vaccine when it becomes available.
We mentioned at the top we're looking at the start of another school year. Are there things that students and teachers should be aware of regarding COVID going into the start of the September school year?
Yeah, I think we should even broaden the discussion, right? It's not just COVID. We know there's respiratory viruses that circulate in the fall and winter season. Of course, COVID is going to be one of several. We know there's going to be RSV as it comes every year. We know there's going to be influenza every year. And, obviously with influenza, it's very important that people get their influenza vaccinations. We talked for years now about improving the quality of indoor air in school environments and, of course, other indoor environments. And again, that's not going to eliminate the problem, but it just might reduce the risk of transmission in indoor settings where we know the vast majority of these respiratory pathogens are transmitted. Obviously, there's no mandates at this point in time. Some people might choose to wear a mask in an indoor setting to lower their risk of contracting an infection, including COVID and other respiratory viruses. So, there's nothing really new here. These are the same tools that we've had for years. And, obviously in the era of no mandate, some people will choose to adopt them and others might choose not to.
All right, we will leave it there. Dr. Bogosh, thanks for your time tonight.
My pleasure.
Dr. Isaac Bogosh is an infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network. Sophia Kambalia joins us for a look at the extended forecast. Sophia, you mentioned earlier this may be the last gasp of super summery weather. Tell us more.
Farah, yes, just the messenger. I alluded to a cool down coming up in the long range, a blast of early fall. Let's take you through it day by day. Overnight feeling like 8. We hit 29 though today. It was a decent run at a 30-degree day. And if it feels like a while since you've had that 30-degree heat, you'd be right. The last time was July 28th. We have not had a 30-degree day yet in August. And the last time we had an August without a stretch of days in the 30s was in 2008. It's only happened 8 times in history that we haven't had a 30-degree day in August. How many cooler days have we had? Well, days below the normal August average, we've had 11. So it's certainly been a chillier month, and it's certainly been a drier month than the last, well below the average August rainfall. You remember last month when we had nearly double the July rainfall? It was warm though in July. We can't win this summer, can we? Nice stable week though. We'll take that as a win. Shower chance increases Wednesday into Thursday, and so does a bit of humidity. But the temperatures stay on the cool side of seasonal, especially into the long range. No chance of a 30-degree day there. And this is the 14-day trend. These temperatures are more reminiscent of mid, maybe even towards the latter half of September. Overnight lows in parts of cottage country may even be in the single digits into next week. This is pleasant sleeping weather, but certainly a blast of early fall-like weather. I, for one, am not ready for it. Farah?
Me neither. Thanks, Safia. The Women's World Cup wrapped up today, and the squad from Spain celebrated their first ever Women's Championship. Despite some good early chances by England, it was Spain that scored the lone goal of the first half, and it would prove to be the only goal of the entire game. This year's tournament shattered attendance records with 2 million passing through the gates. Television viewers also hit unprecedented numbers. And it's a hockey camp like no other that just wrapped in Mississauga this weekend. More than 50 blind or partially sighted players took part in the 2023 Canadian Blind Hockey Summer Development Camp.
It's just making the game accessible to people that are blind or partially sighted. I think we hear over and over again, you may have a child with a vision impairment whose siblings all play hockey and they've never had the opportunity. Or just a child who's just a really big hockey fan and has never had the opportunity. And once you get that adapted puck out there, and you get them in a program with other kids who are blind or partially sighted with the adapted rules, it just shows that the sky's the limit.
The camp started back in 2014 with a few players. Now, organizers say it's attracting youth and adult players from across the country and even the world. A large part of what makes blind hockey possible is a hollow adapted puck. It's 3 times the size of a regular hockey puck, and it rattles so players can hear it. Stay with us. We'll be back with more. One of Toronto's last remaining video stores is marking a milestone anniversary this weekend. It has been 30 years since Bay Street Video first popped up in the city's downtown core. The shop has been quietly thriving through decades of format changes, industry upheavals, and even a pandemic. We pop by to find out how it stays relevant.
We're not going anywhere. We don't get rid of our rentals. There's no licenses that are going to expire halfway through Mad Men and you have to try and find it somewhere else. And crazy. We have the biggest DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K collection in probably the country. We have over 35,000 DVDs to rent, almost 10,000 Blu-rays to rent, and 4K is a newer format, but we just cracked the 500 mark for rentals in that format. And we also sell. We've been renting and selling since the beginning. I think that's why we're still here for a lot of ways. It's like rentals kept us going where sales were down, sales kept us going when rentals were down.
Can't even fit everything out there right now.
Our collection is going to be constant and just ever growing. We have stuff that isn't available anywhere else. Especially now, you hear all of the studios taking stuff off for tax credits and things getting pulled off after 30 days or something. Nothing has a chance to be a cult hit anymore, except here.
Right here, Merchant Ivory. You know the points system? Everyone's got points for everything? Points are out. So here you get an old school stamp card. And look, that's a free rental right there. You come in and you get a stamp every time you rent or purchase a movie. No points. Old school stamp card. It's pretty great.
I live in Mississauga, but most of the video stores over in Mississauga have already closed down. This was one of the only places that I found on Google that was still selling Blu-rays. By the time I stepped in for my first time, I was like, wow, there's a whole lot more than I could even count for.
Stamp card. Oh, perfect.
Media doesn't disappear, as well as the businesses don't disappear when we continue to actually celebrate them as physical artifacts and places that we can visit where people can be and be sustained by that.
There is only so much on the streaming services, and there's so many different streaming services run by different companies, and we like to think of it like we have all of that stuff.
And finally tonight, A Taste of Manila was back this weekend, celebrating all things Filipino food and culture. A big goal of the festival is to familiarize the community with what Filipino cuisine has to offer.
Not just educate, to familiarize the general community what Filipino food, the cuisine, because as you can see, there's Chinese food, Japanese food, is all over the place. Now we want the Filipino food get accepted or be known to the general community, mainstream Canadians. We have a lot to offer, and people, even you will like it.
Some of the mouth-watering food highlights included Filipino pork and chicken barbecue skewers, and the Filipino take on the Hispanic dish adobo. The festival is now in its 10th year. It closed off almost a 1-kilometer stretch from Wilson and Bathurst to Laurel Crest Avenue. The closures will be in effect until Monday morning. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Before we go, we want to take you to Chinatown. That's where the annual Toronto Chinatown Street Festival was on this weekend. From performances to sizzling street food, barbecues, and parades, there was plenty to do at this year's event. And remember, you can stay caught up on news anytime on our website, cbcnews.ca. Have a great night.